Hey, I'm Lars Schmeink, and today I'll be breaking down how cyberpunk is portrayed in video games. You might have encountered cyberpunk when you've watched The Matrix, Blade Runner, or Blade Runner 2049. Cyberpunk is a science fiction genre that deals a lot with corporations taking over the world and with how technology kind of becomes invasive into our bodies. The video games we'll be talking about today are Cyberpunk 2077, Watch Dogs Legion, and Deus Ex Mankind Divided, along with other popular games like Syndicate, Ghost Runner, Deus Ex Human Revolution, and Detroit Become Human. Let's take a look at how biohacking is portrayed in cyberpunk video games. DeepNet, Cyberpunk 2077.
Barry. Johnny.
Barry. On a le plancher.
Cyberpunk 2077 calls it the deep net. In William Gibson's Neuromancer, it's called cyberspace. In Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, it's called the metaverse. And the Wachowskis have called it the Matrix. But it all basically means the same thing. A net spread all over the world where you can access basically every object, every data that is available.
Where are we?
Our BBS, Data Fortress. Bridge to the deep net.
In Cyberpunk, the deep net is usually geometrical objects lined up as representations of data. They're flying over this grid of electronic data points. The grid is actually dominated by an early 80s movie called Tron, which has these objects moving in straight lines. It's actually one of the most iconic aspects of cyberpunk. You can see this in the scene when she hacks in. The room that she's in, with the people standing there and the ice tub and everything, it's all represented as data. And this is, of course, the same as in The Matrix when Neo realizes that he's the one and kind of goes into the Matrix to shape objects that are formed of code. So this is kind of the visual cue that we have here from two of the kind of original cyberpunk ancestors. So the idea of actually becoming part of the computer system, going into the computer system, is appealing in the sense that you're opening up a completely new world, right? So you're not just sitting in your basement in front of your computer, but you're actually moving through the world of data, and you can change the world from there. I'm not 100% sure why they do this with the ice tub. It's a new image. I've not seen this before. But on the other hand, maybe they're just afraid of, her body overheating and kind of because the processing power is getting jacked up so high. Upgrading, Cyberpunk 2077.
V? Dr. Vector, we'll see you now.
We're at a Ripper Doc clinic. Ripper Docs are specialist vendors who offer people the possibility to install or upgrade their cyberware.
Cyberpunk has a very unequal society. If you are rich, you would probably go to a high-end clinic. But since most cyberpunk stories actually deal with the criminal element in some way, and V seems to be something like a hired criminal for specific jobs, she probably wouldn't have the ability to go to a normal clinic or to pay for high-scale body augmentations. So the only choice is to go to, in this case, a Ripper Doc.
Vicky, spry as ever, you old ripper.
Hernandez pounces on the chance, coming in with a couple of hooks. Gaining the upper hand pretty darn quickly.
Need to bump up my specs and get a grip.
Body modifications in cyberpunk are based on the idea of prosthesis of amputees. We're kind of taking this a step further to the idea that certain jobs require you to be implanted with something. So if you want to do a specific job, your normal eyesight doesn't actually work anymore, so you would be required to get specific eyesight or attach tools to your body because your body becomes kind of the tool itself.
Lights out for a minute, all right? You might feel a little discomfort, maybe blurred vision, low contrast, glitches. So, how's it look to you?
With the scanner, we can zoom in on things and take a closer look.
Ought to work like a charm. Now draw your weapon. You should see your ammo count in a brand new sight.
In the scene, we do see two different kinds of augmentations. On the one hand, we do see the Ripper Dog's augmentations, which are very mechanical. He has kind of tools in his arm, which he uses for his work. On the other hand, you see V's implantations or V's augmentations. A dermal implant is actually just like a glove or something that she wears now permanently. So it integrates much smoother with her body. It kind of becomes a part of an extension of her body in a much less mechanical way.
The subdermal weapon grip links to our scanner and shows us weapon information like ammo count and fire modes.
If I want to be a rough guy, then I would choose something very mechanical looking. Whereas if I want to be in high society, I would be choosing something very stylish. Think of your arm being displayed with Louis Vuitton paraphernalia, and you can choose a different style to project a certain image.
Thanks again. You're the best, Vic.
I'm really amazed. She actually gets an eye implant and an arm implant within 5 minutes. She just walks out of there. If I break a leg and I want it reset and it takes like 5 minutes, that would be awesome. Forced augmentation. Deus Ex, Human Revolution.
So, how's it feel, being augmented?
Excuse me?
Don't take it the wrong way. I mean, I've got a few neuro enhancements myself. Discreet ones to help me fly better. But I chose to get them implanted. You didn't.
In this scene, Adam Jensen is just recovered from his operations. He was a human security guard who got blown up at a terrorist attack. His body was so damaged that he's, let's say, 80% augmented instead of just being a normal human. This has kind of been forced on him because he couldn't consent to this.
You're right. I didn't choose to get augmented. And I still don't know if I would have if given the choice. But today felt good.
So he actually needs these because otherwise he would die. So a lot of this goes actually back to the idea of disability and of norms that we set for what an abled body is supposed to be doing. I think that's an interesting take on this, to put the player into the position of someone who didn't want to be augmented but now needs to be. I think the most outstanding thing about him visually is the implantation of his eyewear is actually covered by retractable mirror shade lenses. There's a 1986 short story collection called Mirror Shades by Bruce Sterling, and in its introduction, Bruce Sterling actually says that mirror shades make you look awesome and cool because they hide the crazy. You can't see the crazy in the people's eyes. So mirror shades is kind of like the ultimate thing for a cyberpunk. Biohacking. Deus Ex, Mankind Divided.
Rucker?
In this scene, we see Rucker, who is a leader for the augmented people. He's being forcibly removed from power by a targeted attack, which eventually kills him.
Chicane, Rucker is dead.
Rucker seems to have some kind of body modification in his head, and he does have 2 arm prostheses, so it looks like he actually has human arms, but when they malfunction, they kind of open up and show different functionalities. Body modification can be exploited since it is a commercial commodification, right? It's something you buy from a company. If, for example, because of an accident you have an amputated arm, then obviously replacing that arm with a body modification actually makes a lot of sense, but replacing healthy body organs might be risky, and the possibility of it being hacked might actually deter you from doing that. We can see this already in, for example, self-driving cars, which hackers have been trying to hack and modify and remote control. And obviously with any technology that is being run by a computer system, the chance of being hacked is always possible. Consciousness. Deus Ex, Mankind Divided.
Allison?
It's time now. The body is the prison.
Allison is actually referring to one of the key ideas of cyberpunk. Body and mind are separate from each other. The biological, the body is actually faulty, it is limited. So she wants to get rid of the body, leave behind her bodily existence, and kind of become pure data, pure mind, pure consciousness. And cyberpunk is referring to ideas of transhumanism, to take technology and make us ever smarter, ever better, the best version or the best person that we can be.
I know what you're doing. I've seen this kind of tech before. It ended badly.
Your ignorance of your own people is contemptible. This is the Ascension. Only our bodies will die. Our minds will leave this corporeal shell and merge with the divine consciousness of the machine god.
This is a part of a religious idea of a world beyond our physical world, a virtual afterlife. So there is this utopian moment of this being paradise. But on the other hand, it also is very dystopian in the sense that if it is computer generated, if it is a virtual world, it also means that it can be hacked. You could actually reprogram that heaven to become hell, technically. So there is a lot of ambiguity around this concept, and I, for myself, don't think I would want my consciousness uploaded. Let's talk about cities in Cyberpunk. Megacity, Ghost Runner. Seeing this city is actually pretty much my expectation of visuals for a cyberpunk city. It's night, it is almost rainy, there's fog. The city is very vertical. There's areas beneath me that I can't even see because of all of the fog and smog going on. There's areas above me which I can only imagine where people living in. I like the dark aesthetics, neon lighting and everything being very vague and film noirish. And this of course goes all back to Blade Runner. This is exactly the kind of image that Blade Runner has immortalized as being cyberpunk. One of the aspects that everybody thinks of when they think of cyberpunk is the image of the flying cars which open Blade Runner. And this is actually picked up here by these rails which you can hang on to. I think it's very interesting because if you think of the city as being vertical, then of course movement on foot is going to be problematic. In order to move from one place to the other, you have to navigate by flying, which they actually chose very well here. Cityscape, Cyberpunk 2077.
We've greatly enhanced our crowd and community systems to create the most believable city in any open world game to date.
The city actually takes precedence in most of these games, and it's kind of a character of its own. I like that the game actually populates its city with a lot of different people, and more than most cyberpunk games, you can actually see people from all walks of life. And I also like the fact that they start off with showing you the city by day, because most cyberpunk actually plays at night.
The city's streets are bustling with crowds of people from all facets of life, all living their lives within a full day and night cycle.
I do like the fact that there is advertisement everywhere. You kind of have to navigate the space, which is kind of overwhelming at first. The city is actually pretty clean, which is unusual. Cyberpunk usually goes with the dirty and gritty. I don't think it's actually a requirement for a city to be dirty to be cyberpunk. It probably goes more with the crime, but this seems to be a part of the city that is actually, very central. It's kind of a business hub of some kind. So I think it's okay that it isn't all dirty. I think it's an interesting fact that everybody seems to be very polite. They actually stop at red lights, which I think is very uncommon for the idea of a cyberpunk city which is infested with crime. I like the fact that they've taken their time and kind of constructed a real city where people actually do stop at red lights. Let's see how governments are represented in cyberpunk video games. Police state. Deus Ex, Mankind Divided.
Připravte si papíry. Připravte si papíry na inspekci. Co je za problém?
Wouldn't dream of it, Alex.
There's a difference between worlds in cyberpunk that are still run by nations and worlds which are run by corporations. But they both basically have complete militarization of security work. So the idea here is not to be there to protect and serve, but actually to be projecting fear, projecting control. You have a lot of inequality in these worlds.
Nezastavuj se!
There's a lot of conflict around the idea of police brutality, of police states. You see the police force not in day-to-day uniforms, but you see them kind of in riot gear. They have heavy equipment, body armor, faceplates. You can also see this in the drones. They look very military. They have actually weapons on them. So this is a surveillance state. This is a police state that wants to enact control by show of force. For me, cyberpunk is a very political genre, so having political commentary in there and pointing it out is actually kind of an important part of reading this. There's a correlation between what happens in Cyberpunk and what happens in our real world. You could see similar things in the Hong Kong protests, where the Chinese government put up forces that looked very military. The Hong Kong police was decked out in riot gear, and they were using facial recognition software. And the protesters were using masks to mask their facial recognition. So there is a correlation between cyberpunk media and activism at the moment. Privatization, watchdogs, Legion.
With London under attack by a mysterious terrorist, the government turns to a private military company called Albion to keep everyone safe. What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong when handing over security issues like police force to a private company? I would ask what could possibly go right. So if corporations take over state and national responsibilities, then private security forces become a commodity for a specific company. What would be their profit margin? What would be their incentive to do certain things? This is an issue that we see with the private prison system in the US. If they actually make money per inmate, they are more incentivized to have more inmates. So issues like public security should not be privatized. So in this clip, we see police forces that actually look much more like the police force we're used to. So they're in uniform, normal clothing. There's very little riot gear here, or there's less of it than in the previous clip that we've seen. And I think this is because the game actually wants to be closer to our reality. It wants to be more like the world that we know, giving you an authentic feeling of this is how things could go with the technologies that we already have, and give you more of a creepy feeling when these people become exploitative. I find it interesting in this clip that they've chosen to name the company Albion. Albion is an old antique name for the British Isles. It's interesting to go back to that reflection of these good old times when law and order was provided by knights. So there's this poetic moment to it, naming that Albion. Next, let's take a look at weapons. Cyberware. Cyberpunk 2077. There's a aggressively masculine tendency in Cyberpunk, and I think this actually goes with the idea of these visceral fight scenes. They're using swords, they're using the mantis blade, which of course doesn't make much sense if you can actually have railguns. Why would you even get close enough to be using blades? But I think it actually, in a game, it looks much better, and it's nicer gameplay. Choosing to use a weapon that is implanted has, of course, the very usual advantages in the sense that you can hide the weapon better. It is actually seamlessly integrated into your arm. So when you're undercover, when you're doing stealth work, you could actually move through recognizable scanners and so on and just look like you have a cyber arm. You can now actually, shoot someone just by pointing a finger. This is a power fantasy. The idea is, you become a weapon. From all of these weapons that they show you, I think, of course, the mantis blade is the one that looks the most awesome. This unfolding of this blade and the ability to just, slash into bodies looks the most visually impressive, whereas a cannon in your arm or something actually seems rather pedestrian in terms of, okay, yeah, you got a gun, just this one's hidden in your arm. Repossessing cyberware. Syndicate.
Upgrade potential detected.
In the scene, we actually see him physically removing that dart chip from the brain, which actually makes a lot of sense because cyberware is a physical component in your body. It's not a program being installed or something, but it's actually physically implanted. So you do have mechanical objects, physical objects actually in the body. So in order to get an implant from the brain, you would probably have to extract it from the brain. But I actually like the idea that they're going for the PG-13 version where some kind of thingamajig goes in and kind of pulls it out instead of just chopping the head up. After he's got the chip, he would probably either install it in himself. So Now, depending on how the game handles that, he can just implant it into some kind of socket, or he would have to go to some kind of underground clinic and get it installed. In the game, it usually is just a click of a button. In real life, it would probably be a very traumatic procedure to get this out and then into yourself. And it has some very strange hygiene issues. And this also has the second dimension of body modifications are an expensive commodity produced by companies. So these companies could actually offer you lending services. Instead of paying $20,000 for it up front, you could just pay $1,000 for it each month. So what happens if you negate on that payment? At some point, somebody might come and repossess and recollect your organs. At what point does technology become part of that human? And at what point is technology still seen as an object of technology that can be repossessed? Next up, we'll take a look at artificial intelligence. Android versus human. Detroit, become human.
I know you're angry, Daniel. But you need to trust me and let me help you. I don't want your help. Nobody can help me. All I want is for all this to stop. I just want all this to stop.
So the question of consciousness and of emotions coming up in artificial intelligence is not restricted to cyberpunk itself. It's actually a theme that has been going on in science fiction since Metropolis by Fritz Lang. But in cyberpunk, of course, this is kind of also connected to the idea that machines are essentially objects, not subjects. So who gets to decide how to treat that other person, that artificial person, is actually the owner of that android.
But I was wrong. She's just like all the other humans.
Daniel, no!
Listen, I know it's not your fault. These emotions you're feeling are just errors in your software.
The negotiator is also an android, right? So there's an android talking to an android trying to get him to release the human child. For him to refer to emotions as being errors is, of course, programmed into him. This goes to the idea that an emotion needs to be an error, because if it was an actual emotion, you would have to grant them personhood. If this android actually could feel emotions, you are mistreating him. So there's pain involved and suffering, and that is something you need to address.
I've spent my life taking orders. Now it's my turn to decide.
What makes a human is part of the ultimate problem of cyberpunk. And a lot of cyberpunk actually goes for the easy route that I've mentioned before, which is transhumanism and the idea that you can actually separate the body from the mind. Even if I'm 90% metal, I'm still a human because I still have a human brain. I'm still thinking as a human. But I think that's actually oversimplification way too much. And some of the best cyberpunk stories are the ones that completely throw you off in terms of what makes a person a person. And it actually means that artificial intelligences are persons. It actually means that you can become part machine. You can meld with systems and networks. All of these concepts are kind of going beyond what we consider human. And I think that's where cyberpunk actually becomes really interesting.
What could possibly go wrong?
I'm actually one of the first generations that have grown up with video games. I've been playing video games my whole life and I still do it and I love it. Also, I just love talking about cyberpunk and science fiction, so this has been a blast.